Hi there, welcome to my YouTube channel. I've had a lot of positive feedback from the podcasts that I've done and people liking hearing me, further explain and elaborate ideas from the book. And so I thought it'd be fun just to record basically some sections of the book and then offering some commentary on them. And so I'm going to dive in. I'm going to start with the conclusion to chapter 9, which I'm told really could have been the very beginning of the book. And so I'm just going to start reading from it, and then maybe I'll pause a little bit and offer some elaborations. Chapter 9 is about how to steer a family if you're interested in lessening, reducing, or even potentially eliminating the compulsory rules that you're already applying in your family, and to come more in alignment with the ideas in this book. It's a chapter of how to kind of shift from being rules-based to rules-free. And this is the conclusion where I talked about my experiences as a middle school and high school science teacher. So here we go. Conclusion. The most durable barrier to removing rules is fear. I got a strong sense of this fear long before I ever had kids. Fresh out of college, I was an idealistic middle school teacher with a vision for setting kids free in the classroom. Yeah, I was middle school, high school science teacher. I was 7th, 8th grade, 11th, and 12th grade. And I did a lot of stuff. I taught for 5 years. I was a coach. I directed the play. I was class advisor. I ran a whole bunch of clubs. I was really, really deep into school and teaching. But I was also on this kind of mission. I saw school as a human rights violation. So I used to enjoy talking about with friends and whatnot when I went into teaching, because I was so anti-school as a kid. So I was kind of seeing myself as going into the heart of the beast and liberating, creating this, very free atmosphere and kind of taking over. So I aimed to create an oasis of freedom, and I thought kids would be so appreciative that they'd do anything I asked. I was so naive that I was genuinely shocked when they walked all over me. Each day was a slow motion nightmare, and I struggled for the rest of the year to gain some semblance of control. And that's what happened. It was absolutely miserable. The first day of school, I explained to these kids, I was like, hey, look, I'm on your side. I'm going to make time in the classroom enjoyable. I'm going to give you, let's do half and half. Give me your attention for half of the period, and then I will let you do whatever you want for the other half of the period. I'll teach you everything you need to know. I won't mess around. I won't waste your time with busy work and worksheets and crap like that. I'll just tell you what's important. And oh my God, they just tore me apart. It's not the right word, but I had that deal did not work. It's not like they did what I asked at all. I would say took advantage, but they didn't take advantage of me because they were a captive audience. So if you're a captive audience, you really can't take advantage of somebody. You're already being taken advantage of. But no, it was miserable. I had no classroom control. I had absolute chaos. I had no ability to lock things down, and it was miserable. It became very miserable very quickly. Day 2, day 3, I started trying to backtrack, trying to think of how I could gain some modicum of control. And it was a miserable year. I kind of got used to it and developed some coping mechanisms, techniques, but that was only that came at a cost. Okay. So each day was a slow motion nightmare, and I struggled for the rest of the year to gain some semblance of control. I learned the reasoning behind the expression, "Don't smile until Christmas." That's true. I never heard that before. And apparently this is an old saw in teaching circles. It's that when you start the new year, you don't smile before Christmas. In other words, you take the first half of the year to establish yourself as a no-nonsense disciplinarian who can control a classroom and can't be pushed around and is not a softie. And the reason behind this is that if you are lenient, it's very hard to become a tight disciplinarian. It's very easy to go the other direction. It's very easy to be a hard ass and then let up gradually. And so you don't want to start the year as a softie and then try to clamp down and achieve control. You got to start off as a hard ass with full control, and then you give you bleed out some leniency as is appropriate. Always with this kind of give and take, always with a threat that you can regain control at any moment. Boy, did I take that to heart. In fact, my second year teaching, I said, okay, this time I'm going to start off as a hard ass. And so my second year teaching, I kind of built myself up all summer, and I came in guns blazing. My second year, I was unpleasant, very stern-faced. I was coaching soccer. I remember the first thing I did, the first soccer practice, I made the kids clean the equipment room. Like we didn't even touch a ball. Brutal. And it did work. I mean, it was much easier to relax later. Even the kids that knew me from the year before kind of forgot because I just came at it with so much stern, strict, hard-ass energy. Like once you decide to adopt a persona, you can really fill out that persona if you're a good actor. Okay. The key to classroom discipline is consistency. You absolutely cannot crack, not for a second, because as soon as kids catch a glimpse of leniency, they will push hard, and you will expend energy battling them. If instead you show only an impenetrable wall, they will give up hope of finding a crack and resolve themselves to accepting your dominance. I was afraid of another year facing off against these devious little monsters, who, I now believed, were programmed by human nature to find and exploit my weaknesses. In truth, they were innocently seeking an escape from control, not deviously trying to make me miserable. So I took it personally, and I can understand why you could take it personally. And it just seems like, to a classroom teacher, it seems like kids are just programmed to find your weaknesses. They got nothing to do all day, all class 40 minutes to just, and it is true, right? They are chafing under this compulsory control, and their minds, you can either, become, as a student, become helpless and just play ball and become compliant, or you can, especially the kids that had nothing left to lose, just dedicate yourself to figuring out how to eke out some semblance of freedom and dignity in this situation. Anyway, I did think it was about human nature, and then I discovered what human nature was. The way I saw things was that I was this idealistic romantic coming out of college, which is true. I was into romanticism and that kind of philosophy, and I thought that, the human spirit, will respond to my humanistic, idealistic goals and intentions, and everybody is inherently good, and we'll all have a lovely time. And instead, when they rebelled against that and treated me like crap, again, I don't technically think they treated me like crap, they just were chafing under the system that they were living in. Nonetheless, when I perceived them as treating me like crap, I figured that, wow, no, human nature is not beneficent and kind of loving, and human nature is kind of dark and wants kind of chaos and to rebel against order and a lot of these kind of common tropes I came to believe. So, human nature, red in tooth and claw kind of, and by teaching, I had glimpsed human nature and came to accept the harsh realities. Okay. How was I, a teacher who had gotten into the game because I had wanted to open up the world to kids, going to reinvent myself as a hard ass? Looking back, I can see that the real problem was not naivete on my part, but the simple contradiction of trying to foster freedom in a compulsory environment. Freedom is not incompatible with human nature, but it is incompatible with locking kids in a building all day and forcing them to learn math. The rationales that I had accepted were not truths about the real world, but instead were rather obvious fictions that many of us pretend to believe, in the way that fans of professional wrestling pretend to believe the show isn't fake. Pretending to believe school works enables parents to go to work thinking their kids are in good hands, and teachers to conceal their tyranny over little people with masks of respect. And for teachers to conceal their tyranny over little kids with masks of respectability and high moral standing. So, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like this idea that school is, you've heard the term kayfabe. That's the term that describes professional wrestling, where everybody knows that professional wrestling is fake, but they treat it like it's true. And that is, I think, a large explanation of what's going on in school. People know that this is a tyrannical environment. They know that kids are really not learning all that much during the day. They know that there are, lots of harms of locking kids and forcing them to take assigned seats and do what they're told and all that stuff. But they pretend that it's necessary for social order. It's necessary for kids learning about the real world. It's necessary for, socialization. It's necessary for learning the basics, blah, 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 right? There's all these tropes that are used to mask the fact that this is, at bottom, bullshit. It's tyrannical. So I had bought into these falsehoods. All right. Imposing rules and enforcing them through physical and psychological dominance is a decisive advantage, the ultimate ace in the hole. Giving it up is scary, and that is really the whole point. Giving up the decisive advantage that parents have, adults have over kids, is scary because it leaves you vulnerable to dealing with, taking them seriously. Taking them seriously is scary because, they have a lot of bad ideas. They're ignorant. They are vulnerable. They need protection. They need, you have all these obligations to them. You got to prepare them for the world. And if you simply enforce your decisive advantage and say, I'm going to make you learn math, I'm going to make you learn to read, make you learn to write, I'm going to make you behave appropriately, right? If I force all of these things, in the end, if they don't work, if they backfire, and they often do backfire, kids often do rebel, I can always have the out and say, well, I tried to make him a good person. I tried to make him learn math and be successful, and I tried to make him learn how to read and write. I did my best, and no one is going to have a real leg to stand on and say, you were a failure. But if you abandon that decisive advantage, now if the kid's a failure, what did you do? You neglected them. You didn't follow through on your obligations to their safety and their ability to develop independence. And so it's the fear that comes with abandoning or dropping your decisive advantage. I think that is the major obstacle. Okay. Giving up your decisive advantage is scary. It leaves you vulnerable and without a backup plan. It puts you at risk of the ultimate failure, being a bad parent. Of course, you can always fail with rules. Of course, you can always fail with and because of rules. But rule enforcement grants you the excuse that at least you tried in the socially acceptable way. You did not neglect your kids. You may have failed, but you did not fail them. When our first daughter began to toddle, I felt the rationales from my teaching days well up within me. As I learned about taking children seriously, I feared that if I let the mask slip, my daughter would be battling me, not just for the year, but for the rest of my life. If I started off as a softie, I'd never regain an edge. Yes, I clearly remember that tension, that worry when she began expressing her will around, age 1 or so. I remember feeling very similar to that first year of teaching and regretting that I was such a softie. And, once you let the mask slip, right? Once you drop the decisive advantage, once you admit that, once you, not so much admit, but once you offer them, once you take no for an answer, once you offer them freedom, you're going to be clawing. If you change your mind, you're going to be trying to claw it back for the rest of your life. And that's a lot of pressure. Taking children seriously requires parents to overcome this fear. The way to overcome fear is through knowledge. Good reasons are reassuring. The essential challenge of this book is to provide a reason that is so appealing that you feel comfortable giving up the decisive advantage of imposing your will. Rule enforcement is like a reassuring tool, and hopefully I've shown that this tool is actually a liability, that both you and your kids are better off without it. It's actually a bigger risk to use the tool than to drop it. What should we replace it with? The same tool we use with adults. So yeah, that's the analogy, is that the decisive advantage is like having a tool, but this tool is actually more harmful than helpful. It's a tool that works in the short run, right? It achieves what you want in terms of outcomes and behaviors in the near term. Sometimes it just provokes, right? Rules sometimes just provoke defensiveness and fighting and rebellion right off the bat. But if done well, if expertly applied, like I had learned to do when I was teaching, I was confident I could definitely be a hard ass and be strict and be stern and ease up and lighten up and be fun when it was appropriate and kind of dance back and forth, but ultimately always regaining control and retaining the upper hand. You don't want to do that, because even using it causes damage and problems. And that was the point of chapter 4. What are the problems of using control with your kids? What are the foul 4? So I'll talk chapter 4 probably next. But that's the point of this, is the key message of the book is that the decisive advantage is a liability. It's actually not an advantage in terms of your relationship with your kids. If you want a great relationship with your kids, you can't use this tool. Just like, a gun is a tool for getting kids to do what you want, right? You could threaten them at gunpoint to learn to read and be polite in public and all of that. So yeah, a gun is a tool, and it can be very effective on one hand, but it's a liability to be using a gun with your family, right? As a persuasive tool, it's actually a liability. And that's, actually an extreme, severe example, but you get the idea of a tool being effective in one hand, but actually being a liability from another perspective. And that's the perspective that matters. The perspective that matters the most is the perspective of the relationship, not the perspective of what the kid does, how they behave in the short term. Okay, so what should we replace this decisive advantage with? And what I'm saying is we replace it with the same thing that we use with adults. We don't apply a decisive advantage with adults in our lives. If we want adults in our lives to do something differently, we don't threaten them, we don't try to coerce them, we don't shame them. What do we do? So here's the last paragraph of the conclusion. Most people have realized that in the realm of their adult relationships, attempting to control others is not only futile, it is relationship destroying. It is also morally wrong. We control children because we can, not because it is right. Our decisive advantage is also a destructive one. Even if we could wield psychological superiority against other adults in our lives, we wouldn't, because relationships wrought by manipulation lack richness and depth, the very reasons for building relationships in the first place. I'll pause for a sec. There you have it. That's that paragraph is directly from my wife. She says this over and over, and this is where I really slotted it into the book. That, there's a point in your life as an adult where you realize that trying to control other people is a mistake. All right, a lot of people learn this early on in relationships. They try to control their, boyfriend or girlfriend, and there's lots of movies about this, right? This always goes badly, so controlling others is not only futile, it's relationship destroying, right? Nobody wants to be intimate with somebody who is trying to manipulate them or control them or get them to do certain things. Yeah, so control being relationship destroying. And well, it looks like I ran out of quietness. So I'll stop here. But this was fun talking. And try again with chapter 4, I think. All right, ta-ta.